I served as the deputy superintendent in Boston when the Boston work began. And first, I want to say to Carl, you make this work seem like it was easy. And I just want to say, I have the scars on my back when we moved from poor to fair and then fair to good. And so I just want to say to folks in this room, this work is not easy work. And I want to say to the secretary, the work that you did in Chicago and your willingness to go against the grain and push people where they don't want to go is really important, and that I appreciate that. But I think we're going to have to talk about it takes courage to do this work, and that people are going to have to stand up. How many times are we going to ring the alarm bell? You know, I mean, in '83 we rang it, and we're still talking about some of the same things. So part of my question is, what are people going to do different when they leave the room? And how is the word about this report going to go out along with the PISA report? Because I think coupled together, it's the alarm bell, and we don't have time. You know, so I'm just putting it on the table because the scars are still there. I would do it again, but they're still there.
Okay. Carl, you better comment on that.
Well, you know, higher ed makes you forget all those bad times. So
I can speak to it.
I'm very bullish on this report because you know, if Randy were still here, one of the things get ready, I'm about to criticize the media. One of the things that the media does, it covers all those John Waynes, whether male or female, and so you get a steady diet of that. The beauty of this report for me, and I'm not looking for publicity, but the beauty of this report is that it tells the backstory on places that actually got better. And if we can leave here with a sense of purpose with regard to finding out more about those school systems that are getting better and disseminating that information here in conferences in America and other vehicles, including the Education Writers of America, we will have done a lot to improve prospects for youngsters who historically haven't been well served.
Arnie, you are being encouraged to keep telling it how it is, even when it's not popular. Do you want to comment?
Well, first of all, I couldn't agree more. This work takes extraordinary courage. And part of, I think, our challenge is if we just keep relying on heroic, courageous leaders, that's not sustainable. So again, I keep going back. The disconnect is how do we get the general public, parents, the general public, to demand more so that it's not, you can't run from the facts. I always say, you know, whether Republican, Democrat, whatever, I would love education to be the issue that everyone goes to the voters box, the ballot box on. The reality of it is education is, you know, 6th, 7th, or 8th on that list. And so we need to support the courageous leaders like Deb, like Carl, to do the hard work they're doing. But ultimately, and again, I think whether you see this as a civil rights issue, whether you see this around economic security, whether you see this around national security, that 75% of our young people can't go into the military today because they have a criminal record, they've dropped out, whatever the reason might be, whatever lens you see this, we are at this, I think, this defining moment, this Sputnik moment. And if we can elevate the profile of this issue, it compels all of us to act in very different ways, and we won't have to rely on these individual acts of courage.
My name is Michelle Pierre-Farid with New Leaders for New Schools, and I see that in the report they speak to the selectivity of the principals in schools. And then they have a strong partnership with how they instructed their principals so they can have a strong caliber of knowledge skills. Can you speak to what happens after they go through their training programs? What is the ongoing support to make sure that the principal's knowledge is sustainable and they're supporting them for the innovation to improve their schools?
There are principal coaches, right? And not just in Long Beach. We saw this in Singapore. We saw this in Hong Kong. We saw this also even in Brazil in some port affairs systems, that there are principal coaches. And what they do is they go out and they first and foremost will prioritize those schools that are struggling, because this is where principals need the most support. But as a system becomes good to great and great to excellent, They are much more thought partners of, how can you take the wonderful educators that are in your school and unleash them further? How do you engage the community in such a way that they are beating down your door? How do you make sure that students are getting the best education that they can? And so across the board, it is that we often talk a lot about teacher coaches. There are also principal coaches that play a critical role. And in particular, we also found systems that have clusters of schools. So Singapore, Boston, so you'll have 10 to 12 schools within a cluster. And that cluster is led by a superintendent. And so a chief of cluster who's sort of like an Uber principal who will spend time with each of the principals of the schools in his or her cluster, again, to provide the support to ensure the sharing of practice. So we see that consistently.
On this theme, Deborah, do you want to talk about how you think about the principals in Rhode Island and what your strategy for developing their impact on the system is?
A big part of our strategy, and we're fortunate to have the support from the Race to the Top grant to be able to help us move this forward. We obviously are, we have a huge focus on the quality of our teachers, but we know that without great school leaders, we're not going to be able to develop our teachers as effectively, but also the role of the principal is so important. And so we are really investing in coaches. We're not calling them that, but it's essentially what they are, to go out and provide support to principals, particularly in the implementation of our evaluation system and the coaching process that's for teachers that's going to go along with that, and helping them to implement that, because it's new for our school leaders new for us to be putting that into place. And then we also are doing a special academy for training the people in our system who will be leading the schools that are our lowest achieving schools, and the ones that we're needing to turn around significantly.